going to start this lesson with a little bit of review of some basic trig identities that you learned in geometry. In geometry, you talked about right triangle trig. And so you learned about sine, cosine, and tangent. And you found that no matter how big the triangle is, so we could have another triangle that is similar, that means it has the same shape and the same size. Anytime that you found the ratio of so I'm going to talk about this angle being theta right now. If you talked about the ratio of the side opposite of theta and adjacent to theta and the hypotenuse, you talked about the ratios of sine, cosine, and tangent. Sine of theta is always the opposite side over the hypotenuse. Cosine of theta is always the one that's adjacent to it over the hypotenuse, and tangent is always the opposite over adjacent. And that's something that you probably spend a lot of time on in geometry. We're going to talk about the reciprocal identities of those three. The reciprocal of sine is cosecant, and it's abbreviated CSC. So cosecant of theta is going to be the reciprocal of this. So it's the hypotenuse over the opposite side. The reciprocal of cosine is secant, and secant is hypotenuse over adjacent. And then cotangent is the adjacent over the opposite. So you can write them in terms of the opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse, or you can just use the reciprocal identities. We know that they are reciprocals of each other. So sine, and these are called the reciprocal identities. Reciprocal identities. And these are going to be used quite a bit, so you'll want to have these memorized, and I think you'll memorize them just by using them. Sine of theta is the same thing as 1 over cosecant theta. So that means that cosecant theta is 1 over sine theta. They're interchangeable. If I see sine, I can substitute it with 1 over cosecant. If I see cosecant, I can change it with 1 over sine. These are truth statements, kind of like postulates or theorems. Cosine theta is 1 over secant theta, and secant theta is 1 over cosine theta. Tangent theta is 1 over cotangent theta, and cotangent theta is the same thing as 1 over tangent theta. So in the same way, we could also talk about our quotient identities. When I see tangent theta, I know that that is going to be sine theta over cosine theta, because tangent is opposite or y over x, and cotangent theta is cosine theta over sine theta. You'll want to make sure and put all of these identities in your notes because you'll need to use them to do homework and take tests.